just a couple items on the director's report. The two reports we're going to send you links to have been released recently that are relevant to the comprehensive plan and just the work of the commissions. The first is the State of Black Oregon report. There's actually a City Club sort of presentation and discussion of it, I think, this Friday. But we'll send a link to all the commissioners. And within that report, it covers a full range of topics. But there is a consideration of development and gentrification in that report as well. And then the second one is the state of housing in Portland, which is a recent report prepared by the Portland Housing Bureau, just sort of a snapshot of housing conditions and affordability across the city that's very informative to our work. So I wanted to let you know about those, and we'll send you the link so you can take a look at your convenience.
There we go. So this Wednesday, actually tomorrow, is Multnomah County Budget Forum being held at ERCO, and there's a number of individuals testifying on their budget priorities, including planning and development. So that'll be at ERCO, and you can find that information. Actually, I have some postcards I can pass around, but that may be of interest.
Thank you. Other items? We have two consent agenda items, and we'll take them separately. Consideration of minutes from 4/28/15 PSC meeting.
Move that be accepted or passed, approved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes. Right-of-way number 7880, request for street vacation North Terminal Road, east of North Lombard Street. Pardon?
Second.
Second. It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes. Introduction. Eric?
Thank you, Chair Ba. This is one of a number of comprehensive plan work sessions, as you know. I think this is number 6. We have two primary subjects today, as you already indicated. The first piece, Deborah and I will go over a number of issues related to residential densities. She'll start out, and then I have a follow-up related to Concordia. And then the second half, or second major component of today, is the economic follow-up, as you noted, which has a number of sub-issues that you already identified. And then we'll wrap up with a brief discussion of where we are in your review of the consent list that we sent you, and then we'll go over and do Q&A on the next steps. As Chair Ba indicated, we're working towards a commission recommendation by July 14th at this stage, so I'll go over what the agendas are for the next few meetings just to make sure everyone's clear on that. Pass this back over to you.
Good afternoon. So I'll be talking about residential densities. I think this is part 4 of the set of discussions about residential densities. And today I'll be talking specifically about some changes from R5 to R7. So you'll recall that the July 2014 map proposal included a set of down designations that we labeled as distance from centers and corridors and prevalent lot patterns. And the objective of that set of proposals was to adjust residential densities to better align the comprehensive plan designation with the lot patterns. And we were looking at areas with two features. One was that they were relatively distant from centers and corridors, and areas where the existing development pattern is predominantly at a lower density than what the comprehensive plan currently allows. The proposal that we presented to you back in July 2014 originated with a request by the Reed neighborhood back in 2011, and that was followed by a similar request by Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association. And so like other things we've done through this process, we wanted to make sure that we were looking at like situations and treating them in like ways. So staff scanned the city at the time to identify any additional areas in the city, outside of centers and corridors, and where there's a general pattern of lots that are approaching or exceeding R7. We wanted to consider all of those together. So you might recall the map on the left shows, I think, 9 areas, and then there's another map on the right. These are the sets of areas that had those characteristics I just described. Again, our 5 areas that are distant from centers and corridors, and areas where either the zoning currently is at R7, but the comprehensive plan doesn't match. We have several situations where we have R7/R5. So we looked at those areas, and then we also looked at areas that have the zoning and comprehensive plan designation of R5, but seem to meet more of an R7 density pattern. And you can see the names of the neighborhoods listed to the right. So we did have a couple of initial conversations with you about this already. So you might recall, and these were the kind of takeaways that staff heard from your discussion. And the 3 takeaways for us were, first, be clear about what problem we're trying to solve. Second is, let's make sure we're consistent across the city. And third, we heard a message that was, keep it simple. Don't make this too complicated. So we have used these takeaways as sort of guideposts for our follow-up analysis that we're going to be describing to you today. So staff poured through a great deal of testimony, and from that testimony, we derived a set of issues or problems that were identified by neighbors that were in support of their requests to do the down designation. And we reviewed these issues or problems in order to ascertain 2 things. One is, which of these are most appropriately addressed by changing the map from R5 to R7? And secondly, which are instead most appropriately addressed through a zoning code change as opposed to a map change? So staff would assert that of this list, and again, this is not a full list, but I think these are some of the major things that came out in the testimony. Of this list, we would say that the down designation, a map change, could address the first 2 items that are listed there. We'd say that large and small lots can be reestablished based on historic underlying lot lines, where they exist, and that's something we talked to you about at one of your earlier work sessions. And so as I had mentioned then, there is a difference between the minimum lot size, depending on whether the base zone and the comprehensive plan designation is R5 or R7. So that does, in fact, make a difference. And while a map change will not erase or negate the underlying lot lines, it would increase the minimum lot size of any new lot that can legally be required or legally be created. So there could be a net decrease in the number of skinnier, smaller lots in a neighborhood, depending on what that zone is. Now, larger lots can currently be divided based on the allowable lot size in R5, but larger lots still would be able to be divided even if it were changed to R7. So it's going to depend on the size to see which lots would still be dividable even if we were to make the change. But again, there may be a slight decrease in the number of new lots created through land divisions if we were to change to R7 because fewer lots will be large enough to allow that division. So that makes sense. Now, the next set of issues, while we have heard quite a bit of testimony at these and we know that these are important, we would assert that these are better addressed through code changes rather than through map changes. So demolition of homes in good condition, and similarly, we heard some of the issues about landscape, mature landscaping, tree canopy. Those are all things that would be better addressed through code changes rather than map changes. The concern about new development being out of scale with existing homes, again, we think that that's something better addressed through a code change rather than the map change. We did hear some concern about duplexes on corner lots, and that is something that could be addressed through some code changes to address scale or development standards, but still allowing for duplexes on corner lots. That could be something could be addressed. And then another really key issue that we've heard through testimony is the loss of economic intergenerational diversity within a neighborhood. when smaller homes are replaced by larger and more expensive homes. So again, very important issue, but not really most appropriately addressed by a map change. We think that could be a code change. So let me describe to you what our analytical approach was very briefly. We went back and re-examined all the study areas that I showed on that earlier map where we had originally proposed the R7 back in the July 2014 proposal. And we looked at concentrations of lots within each of these study areas where the concentration of lots meet or exceed 6,370 square feet. And why that number? It's because that represents R7 density. So basically, we're looking at areas where there were great concentrations of lots that were at or above that size to determine whether those had what we would call a predominant R7 character or quality already existing. In addition to doing this analysis, which I'll show you some examples of in a minute, we looked at a number of additional maps for Eastmoreland that the testimony that Eastmoreland Neighborhood Association provided. As you remember, they provided very well documented testimony with a number of maps, and they did their own analysis. So we did consider that as well. And we also looked at a constraints analysis to determine what environmental and or infrastructure constraints exist in each of those study areas based on our buildable lands inventory. So showing you this map again, rather than show you the analyses for all 10 areas that we looked at, I'm going to just zero in on 3 of them just to give you a sense of what this analysis looked like, what these maps looked like, to see where we were looking for concentrations of lots that were at or exceeded the R7 density. So I've circled the areas that I'm going to show you. One is Eastmoreland, one is an area in the southern part of Lentz, and one is an area that straddles Portsmouth and Kenton. So starting with Kenton and Portsmouth, this is an example of this analysis map. And because I know it's hard to read the legend, I'll give you a quick tour here. The dark red indicates blocks that have a concentration of 75 to 100% of the lots within each block that are at or above R7 density. Pink represents 50 to 74% of the lots within that block that are at the R7 density. Light blue is 24 to 49%, and then the dark blue on these maps is 0 to 23%, although on this particular map that's a bit of an anomaly because the area that is shown in dark blue, they're actually very large lots owned by Union Pacific, and they were just sort of averaged out. So the blue is anomalous, and those lots are currently zoned for R7, and they have a designation of R5. So here you could see that predominantly the area that's shown in color is at that R7 density. There are a few of the outlying areas are slightly less pronounced, but the red indicates that 75% or more are at R7 density already. The next area I'm going to show you is in South Lentz. This is well outside of the Lentz town center, and again, strong R7 character for most of the area. You'll see a couple of little pockets with the blue, meaning those are less concentrated, and the pink is somewhere in between. But fairly strong R7 density that exists today based on the lot size. Now this map shows Eastmoreland, same blue, red, pink categorization. The yellow circle we've added since the last map I think we showed you, that's the quarter-mile from the light rail station. So as you heard from the neighborhood, they don't feel like that most of the neighborhood is within walking distance of that light rail station. So you could see that yellow circle that represents the quarter-mile. You'll remember there's been quite a bit of testimony from Eastmoreland, and they did submit a request for the entire neighborhood, which is the full colored area on this map, to be down designated from R5 to R7. And the eastern boundary that you see here is Cesar Chavez. That's the eastern edge of the neighborhood. The neighborhood's reasons for proposing R7 were based on the historic development patterns and a lack of access to transit and services. And you also heard a concern about loss of sort of the architectural quality, landscape quality, and there were a number of other issues that they raised in their testimony. In comparison with the other maps that I just showed you, there's much more of a mix of lot sizes within Eastmoreland. Again, the red shows blocks that have 75% or more at the R7 density. And then the dark blue is 25% or less, and then it's different percentages in between. Let's see. The other thing that I would highlight here, it's not shown on the map, but the nearest retail node is at Woodstock, right about here. Woodstock right around here, I think, is where the Woodstock Commercial District starts. So as the neighbors attested, they don't have easy walking distance to the commercial node there. Now, South Burlingame hadn't been included in the original July 2014 proposal for a down designation, but through testimony, we heard a number of neighbors asking to be also considered for a down designation from R5 to R7. We hadn't selected this originally because it didn't pass the initial screen based on the proximity of this particular neighborhood to commercial nodes. And there is a commercial node down here, and this is Barber Boulevard, which is a major corridor, and there's a commercial, let's see, I don't know, it's hard for me to see, but anyway, up here there's a Fred Meyer, and then there's another commercial area here. So we did find that this area did have better pedestrian access, much of the neighborhood has much better pedestrian access to commercial nodes and to a major corridor. But again, I wanted to bring this to you because there was quite a bit of testimony asking for this to be down designated in a similar way. Among the issues that South Burlingame neighbors raised were some unimproved streets here, which is true. They're most notably, however, in the areas with the greatest concentration of the R5 lots rather than the larger lots. And substandard streets are not a unique issue here, as you know, quite a few places in Southwest. But for the most part, we found that the proximity to the commercial nodes would not support the down designation. The concerns, though, from the neighborhood did express very similar frustration about the size and scale of infill development, similar to what we've been hearing in Eastmoreland and other neighborhoods as well, and the demolition of older homes and some of the smaller homes being replaced by larger homes. So there is definitely a consistent theme here in some of the concerns that prompted the request in the first place. So I'd like to just outline our findings from this analysis. First, we found that of the study areas we looked at, 9 of them do have fairly uniform lotting patterns based on that red, pink, blue model that I showed you. Eastmoreland and South Burlingame had more of a mix. The other study areas had much more uniform concentrations of R7 density lots. The second important finding is that the underlying lot lines and the kind of development that results as a result of those lot lines would best be addressed through code changes rather than map changes. And changing from R5 to R7, we do find it would reduce the overall number of smaller lots that can be reestablished, but we think a lot of the issues could be better addressed through code. In Eastmoreland, the largest concentration of underlying lots is located east of Southeast 36th, where the lots predominantly match the R5 density. And the pattern of underlying lots continues eastward well past 36 and well beyond, in fact, the edges of the Eastmoreland neighborhood, which ends at Cesar Chavez. So to really look at that as a prompting for consideration, we would say, where would we end? I think that the pattern of underlying lots is not confined to the boundaries of Eastmoreland. So we would say that that's something that we really ought to be addressing through a citywide approach rather than looking simply at a redesignation of Eastmoreland itself. So I would like to conclude with some recommendations for you today. And the first would be that we recommend that you affirm the July 2014 proposals for R5 to R7. However, I'm going to show you in a moment some options for Eastmoreland. And then we would also recommend that you retain the R5 in South Burlingame because of the proximity to services and amenities. But in addition, I do want to again say that we would recommend that we would address the underlying lot and scale issues on a citywide basis through code changes rather than map. And with respect to Eastmoreland, we would recommend that you consider these options. One would be to just retain the R5 and address the issues through code, or we would recommend that you would look at down designating the area within the existing Eastmoreland Plan District from R5 to R7. Now this is a slight modification to what we originally proposed back in July 14, where we had confined the down designation proposal to the area west of 36th. In this new revised proposal, we would recommend going one set of lots east of 36 because that takes in the lots that comprise the plan district boundaries and the original boundaries of the subdivision.
Do you have a visual of that, Deborah?
Yes, I can go back.
Be easier to
Yeah.
contemplate.
Yep. So this map again shows, the whole Eastmoreland neighborhood. This
Where's 36?
line is 36th here. So you can see, and this ties back to some of the things that we heard you say in your earlier discussion. Commissioner Hanson had brought up the idea that there really is a break in the neighborhood between the older curvilinear pattern of streets and then the grid pattern, which really that break occurs at 36th.
Actually, I think there's even a change in the name. I think it's Berkeley. There's Eastmoreland, and then there's Berkeley.
Sounds like California.
Yeah. So again, thinking about your direction, Commissioner Hanson, about looking at the sort of physical characteristics that change at this line, as well as your admonition to keep it simple, we thought that the plan district boundary would be the appropriate boundary to apply the down designation. Now, I will note the neighborhood has asked actually to expand their plan district to encompass the full neighborhood boundaries, but the plan district boundaries aren't on the table right now. We're really looking at the comprehensive plan designation, not the plan district.
So one of the options is then east of 36 would retain the R5 designation, and everything to the west
Correct.
would be R7.
And as I mentioned, if you look at this line, the lot pattern, with the exception of this block that is that where the church is? I believe that might be a church. But the lotting pattern does change at that line to some degree. There's more of a concentration of 5,000 square foot lots. This also is the area where there's the largest concentration of those underlying lots. But that concentration continues out east. It doesn't stop at the line at Cesar Chavez. And so with that, I will open it up for questions and discussion.
Questions, discussion? Comments? Michelle?
Question. So how many potential housing units would we lose in Eastmoreland? And also, can you just identify all the green spaces?
And what
The green spaces on the map? Looked like there were parks and golf courses and things.
Yeah.
Can we just keep it on the map?
Sure. Yeah, that's a good idea. Okay. I'm going to look for the answer because I have that right here. Oh, no, I have it right here. Sorry.
There may not be commercial, but there are resources there.
So when we did the original growth allocation, we had included some numbers in our in a February report to you that showed that Eastmoreland, there actually is not a very significant difference in the number of units. And based on the growth allocation, there's actually an increase only because we changed our assumptions about accessory dwelling units. But the capacity change, it looks like there was, let's see, 2 acres of vacant and underutilized land in the analysis, capacity for 5 new units on the existing plan, 5 with the proposed plan. So really not a material difference in number of units. But I should note that that's not taking into account the narrower lots. That's based on the R5 density if you were doing land division.
Teresa?
So what happens to the places that are already in an R5 or different lot configuration when you change it to R7?
They become non-conforming density, essentially, which in a single dwelling zone doesn't have a lot of meaning because it's the development standards for house development on R5 and R7 are the same. So there's not much effect on the existing property owner. The primary effect would be if you had a bigger lot that was dividable under R5 that's no longer dividable under R7. And as Deborah said, there's not that much of that in this neighborhood anyway. The main capacity for development in Eastmoreland is accessory dwelling units and or the skinny lot or the substandard lot provisions in the zoning code, not the basic R5 versus R7.
Which is hard to quantify, right?
It's it's hard to quantify because you have to document the lots, and we don't have the capacity to do a deed history on all the lots in there and estimate that. But you can get a sense of it from where do those underlying plats exist.
So, and would that then change in the density opportunity also preclude then further investment in transit and other things because you're basing those based off of density as well?
Because the neighborhood's mostly already developed, the 2 zones are not going to have a big impact on how the city plans transit, I don't think, in this case. It would if this was a vacant piece of land that we were debating whether it was R5 or R7. The R7 is less likely to receive frequent transit, but in this case you have an already developed neighborhood that's, as the blue indicates, is partly already developed at R5. So the transit planners are going to look at the actual density more than the zone.
So I just want to walk kind of through some logic here for me. If you do the lot line adjustment zoning code process, that's going to solve some of these problems, correct?
I think that what it would solve, well, it depends on the outcomes of that project
yeah.
because the scope is still being developed, but I think that certainly being able to address the scale of new development, for example, if there are issues about compatibility of what's built new that's bigger and smaller setbacks or scale is different than the existing development, that's something that could be addressed through code refinement. There could be different minimum lot size that could be imposed. There are a number of things that could be changed through code changes that would get at what happens with these underlying lots and what's developed based on that kind of density.
And that's a process we already have scoped and we're heading down the path with, correct?
We have that in our in the mayor's recommended budget.
Okay.
That is a project that we would be undertaking.
Okay.
Yes.
And then we have the task 5 around doing ease and scale, correct?
That's
Or am
I think that's the same. That's
Is
part
that
of
the same?
Same project.
Same process. So if we attack that problem, and if you could go back up to your recommendations. And then address the, from that standpoint, we kind of solve, then we leave the east side alone, and does that address more of the items you listed in the first page?
Oh, where I had the checklist.
Yeah.
Do you want me to go back to that?
Yeah, and so I'm trying to see, what's going to address more of those issues, because it looks like we're only maybe solving one versus 3 or 4.
Sorry. Slow.
So demolition of homes is a separate process.
Correct.
Yeah, but scale of new development through the lot line,
Scale of new development, certainly. I don't know whether we would want to address the duplexes. That would be up to the scope of that project. If we changed the dimensions of a duplex or the design of the duplex to be more compatible. We are not considering removing the ability to do duplexes on corner lots, but instead maybe looking at how they're developed, what the design is.
okay. And so I'm just trying to get to, we can solve more problems with that than doing our 5*7.
More of the issues listed on here, certainly, yes.
And that still does not prevent coming back and looking at our 5*7 at a later date.
Sure.
The single-family house project, you'll be able to see the results of it and see which of these sort of issues it resolves. Our intention is to adjust the size of infill house you can build, and where that's maybe most acute from where we've seen in the neighborhoods is in these situations where you're putting 2 on what used to be 1 lot, and it's, adjusting through the skinny lot thing to have 2 where there used to be 1, and to have both of them be larger than expected seems to be part of the heart of what's concerning people. So that project will definitely address that, both the dimensions of the house and going to come up with some sort of proposals about how to treat those underlying lots, the skinny lots.
And I think the minimum lot width and minimum lot size, I think what we've heard is the truth in zoning. That's a really resonant term, because I think that one expects R5 is going to look a certain way based on 5,000 square feet, and one expects that R7 is going to look a certain way based on 7,000 square feet. But if you look at our code today, it allows different lot sizes that are significantly smaller than those numbers. So there's this sort of hidden density that I think people are asking for more transparency about what a zone really means, and having those numbers be clear. And it could mean just widening the minimum lot width or enlarging the minimum lot size based on different circumstances, and having that be more clear, because I think that the development of some of these skinny lots has been quite a surprise to neighbors when they fully expect they live in a R5 neighborhood and that should mean something, and then they see something much smaller. So I think getting at that truth in zoning issue is really what people are asking for, and I think that would be a fundamental concept built into the scope of this new project.
Okay. And the ability to accelerate that would be maybe us requesting from council to push it a little faster so that, get some relief to the neighborhood quicker. I mean, I don't know how quick we can get it done, but.
There's no, I think we're moving expeditiously. So I don't know that the process to go through that can be sped up. The city council could conceivably ask us to take a look at changing a minimum lot size in a way that could stop skinny lot development for a period of time while the single-family lot project was completed. But that would be a separate sort of ordinance and undertaking. You would, and we'd have to bring it back through here. It would be, but it would, and it would be a way to put a pause on this if you really wanted to. We need to talk with the city attorney. There's sort of legal issues that are raised with creating lots where you could be perceived to be making them undevelopable. So we'd want to research it first. But really, the single-family house project is going to address this and is supposed to be done with recommendations in 12 months, and then we're here. for however long the hearings takes. There's 155,000 single-family properties in the city. So that's part of why we can say we can speed it up. We can speed up the analysis, but that's a lot of folks who are going to be affected by this. So that's part of why we're anticipating the timeline.
But I hear a potential kind of solution of maybe we can, as a PSC, request staff, and if we need to write a letter or something, have council create an ordinance that would, based on the legal, what you find out about legally, if we could pass something as an interim step to then get to the broader issue under the lot line adjustment, I guess, and come back. So we have a two-step process, and that, if the first one's legal and we can get through those legal issues and get council's agreement to then move forward kind of on a separate path, but also have the proposal that's currently in front of council move forward so that we get, not, I don't want to say a moratorium, but a pause, and then come back with a zoning change around design.
The first commissioner, the commission could clearly express that point of view and recommendation to city council. It's something separate from what we're talking about here. And you know, this change would not get to city council till later this year, right? Eric, what's the timing on that?
Yeah, the map changes we're talking about are part of the overall comp plan package, so that goes to council in the fall.
Right. So we'll be half done with the single-family house project by then too.
Okay. But we could get to council before that around an ordinance.
No, absolutely you could.
Okay.
Absolutely you
And
could.
I just am kind of back to the first item of using the right tools here, and it just seems that if we can do that, maybe we get a better solution versus doing a lot of zoning that's not going to actually have an impact into the community. I don't know thoughts, but it seems a reasonable approach. I'm just talking about Eastmoreland specifically. Howard?
I think we should have some clarity about what this debate is and what we're talking about. It seems like you're urging the commission to move forward independently on Eastmoreland and request the city council take that issue. As a timing, is that what you're suggesting? I want to understand, if we go this way, none of this will be impacted until the comp plan is adopted and moved on. What I hear you say is an urgency to move on the Eastmoreland specific project, which I don't have a problem with. I just want to understand, what's the urgency?
Well, the urgency would be giving the communities some temporary relief from the issues they're facing in the community, and then coming back, if I'm understanding it, coming back with the broader zoning package in a year to 18 months, assuming council approves the comp plan and those things.
Well, and just to clarify, I believe that the discussion was around not just these skinny lots or underlying lots that are part of that Eastmoreland proposal. This would apply citywide, is what I thought. It's not a moratorium because technically it doesn't qualify as that, but it's a change that would put a pause on the development of those lots until new rules were in place, or and once again, I don't know exactly how to do that or the legalities of it, but it seems like that could be a possibility. And the trade-offs are this. The pace of development and infill would put a chill on that for a period of time. And, you know, one of the tenets of housing affordability is just to build housing, to increase the supply of housing. However, I don't know, I don't want to misrepresent that I even have a sense of the scale of impact of that, but you know, these things all have implications like that, all of those moves.
There's something I had forgotten to mention to you. The map that I know you can't see it, but this map, can't see it close up. The map I put up shows the underlying lots citywide, so you could see where they're located and the extent to which those areas are distributed across the city. I couldn't make it into a slide because it's so tiny, so you really have to stand right up to the map and see. But just to get a sense that this is of how widespread these concentrations are and how distributed across the city, this is not an Eastmoreland problem. This is a problem
City.
vast. So it's an interesting map, and maybe at the break you might want to take a look at that.
And Andre, just to clarify, could I understand the problems that the community's facing, that they need this acceleration?
Well, it's up here.
Okay.
And so all I'm saying is, can we have, I guess, staff come back on the 26th with an opportunity, whether or not we can do that first part? I mean, if it's feasible, do you think, Joe, you can get back to us? Before we tell you, yes, go ahead and do that, I don't.
Oh, I think it would be, what I would recommend is you all just debate the interest and merits in that. If there is a way to do that, we would develop some alternatives. I don't think I can get you an answer by the 26th. on
Okay.
that. Just from what I know, the backlog is in the city attorney's office right now on a variety of things.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the conversation around this that took place previously, but I don't feel the urgency to put any ordinance to stop development right now. So that's my own opinion. I don't know how the rest of the commissioners feel, but
Okay.
I don't feel a need to get a legal ordinance to stop development and stop infill right now.
Okay. So back to the recommendation, are you comfortable with changing my problem is changing R5 to R7 doesn't do anything in my view. I mean, it just, you're mitigating, you're not solving the problem. And so I'm not really in favor of moving the zoning to R5 to R7. Teresa?
Just to clarify, we're only talking about Eastmoreland, and then we're going to have recommendations on the other areas, or we're not talking about the other areas?
Well, my recommendation would be to affirm the down designation for the other areas where there was a very consistent pattern of R7 where it really is just simply matching the designation to the lot pattern without the variation. I think the variation among lot sizes shows up more in South Burlingame and in Eastmoreland. And our recommendation to you is not to down designate South Burlingame. But if you choose to down designate in Eastmoreland, I would say contain it to the area covered by the plan district, which is just to 36, including the lots fronting on 36 to the
And then
east.
what about Lentz and the
We-
Kenton Portsmouth?
We would recommend there because the down designation simply matches what's already on the ground. It isn't really changing any development capacity, doesn't remove or reduce any development capacity.
Maggie and then Karen.
You haven't spoken.
So to Andre's point, if he's saying he doesn't get the point of why we would be doing this, and I feel like I've been pretty tuned in for the last half an hour of your conversation, can you summarize again for us why you think this is important for the commission to follow your recommendation? Make it very plain and very clear. Why is it that you're looking at downzoning from R5 to R7 in these areas? No, the whole Megillah, this whole thing here. Well, I'm not pulling out Eastmoreland from this conversation. You've made a recommendation. I think I get the point. I'm not knowing that everybody's getting the point. Maybe you could make the point one more time as to why this is important in the redesign of the comp plan for us to do this.
Stepping back to the real beginning of this conversation, we were looking at areas that are located farther from centers and corridors and looking for opportunities to reduce infill pressures there and align the zoning with the lot pattern that prevails in those areas. And so that, as Deborah said, our approach was fairly consistent in many of those other areas she showed on the map, and we didn't run into very much ambiguity. Where we ran into ambiguity was in South Burlingame and Eastmoreland. And so we've come to a position of several options that we've put on the table, either either changing the map for the plan district or not changing it and relying more on the code changes, or both. Again, the big picture is these are places away from centers and corridors where there's some amount of infill that causes community friction that isn't key to our achieving our growth objectives in the city because they're farther away from where we need the growth to occur.
Are people comfortable with the recommendation, except for, I'm going to pull out Eastmoreland, but are everybody else comfortable with the other places in terms of their recommendation?
Yes.
Yes. So Eastmoreland, Burlingame, that's where I'm really probably most uncomfortable with the zone change. But, Don?
The one thing about the zone change in Eastmoreland that I like is the certainty of the time frame. I think I'm glad staff is mentioning code changes and other projects that can get at these kind of conflicts of character in neighborhoods. But we know we can do this zone change before the end of the year. Am I accurate when I say before the end of the year? Or comp plan change?
No, because the comp plan goes through a process of being acknowledged at the state. So the zoning map, it's likely that the code project Joe described will be in effect before the zone map changes would be, because the comp plan is on a slower train, if you will, because of state
Because of the state
acknowledgement.
endorsement. Okay,
Yeah.
that's what I needed to understand. But Eric, it would be through the city process.
Correct. If you all finish your work by July, we believe we can have the city council finish their work by the end of the calendar year.
The other part, so that clarifies the timing for me, thanks. And the other part of my question is, if we go R5 to R7, because of, the lack of proximity to corridors and centers and the characteristics of the neighborhood today, how does that address the inherent conflicts that people are seeing in Eastmoreland in terms of infill housing and doesn't fit with what's there? Does it get at that if we go from R5 to R7? Is there more restriction that solves and addresses some of these issues?
The development standards are the same, so you're not going to affect the size of houses. The only thing you're affecting is the number of lots that are dividable through the standard process.
Which is a lot. That's a big change.
Well, no, it isn't a big change because there's not very many lots that are dividable either way.
Large enough.
The biggest
Okay.
issue, the biggest opportunity for infill in Eastmoreland, again, is either through ADUs or through these pre-existing small lots, the 25 by 100.
Tear downs.
The tear down and replacement because of the pre-existing plat. And that would be affected by a change from R5 to R7. But for the issue that the problem is most of those lots are east of 36, which has more of an R5 density. So it's a little bit of a catch-22.
Okay,
Michelle.
that helps a little bit, thanks.
So the ones that make the most sense to me are the ones where you're making it consistent with the underlying zoning. I do have discomfort with the ones with I guess Burlingame and Eastmoreland, where there's not such a concentration of the 7,000 square foot lots already. So my tendency would be to pull the Eastmoreland and South Burlingame out of it, deal with those issues through the code amendment process, and stick with what I believe is the July 2014 recommendation.
Chris?
So I want to ask the question Don asked in a slightly different way, make sure I understand the answer. So if we did go from R5 to R7 in Eastmoreland and within the plan district, as you suggested, how many opportunities for these skinny lot subdivisions go away because of that transition?
Well, again, it's very hard to quantify because we see where some of those underlying lots are, but we don't know how many of those could be documented in a way that would allow those lots to be created or reestablished. So it's a little bit tricky to give you a number.
Is there
I think the
a boundary
key
condition
difference.
on that? Is it a worst case?
I don't know, but I guess I wanted to just answer in a different way. The real difference between R5 and R7 for the lots is where the minimum lot size allowed. And that's because there's a difference for the lots of record between 3,000 square feet is a minimum lot size if it's R5 and 4,200 if it's R7. So it would take some kind of tricky math to figure out really what that would look like with different, lots of variation in our estimates based on our lack of understanding of where those lots can be documented or not. I know, I'm sorry, that's not a clearer answer.
Maybe another way to phrase it is the concentration of those historic lot lines is much more intense east of 36 than it is west of 36. So you're sort of, if your objective is to use the zoning to reduce that from happening, you're sort of missing the target if that, but if you were to extend the zoning tool and downzone the area east of 36th, there's not a logical stopping point. You might as well go all the way to Lentz then, because it's all that condition.
Michelle?
So isn't there a risk of driving more conversions as people try and get ahead of the zoning map change? So you may be actually driving what we don't want.
Yeah,
I mean, I would want to
usually,
vest my rights.
usually there is a little blip in development activity trying to beat the clock, but we can't
That's
quantify
why I was
that.
asking for an ordinance. So what I hear is there's general acceptance again for number one. And can I say hesitancy for Eastmoreland and Burlingame? Is that,
I would say.
or
Tentative, I'm thinking South Burlingame is okay to me.
for a zone change?
Yeah, to feel okay about it, and I'd like to see more.
For,
To retain the R5, you mean, for South Burlingame?
to retain the R5? Retain the R5 for South Burlingame?
So our recommendation was to not down designate.
Not
Burlingame, yeah.
so everybody's okay with that?
That's
for
what I'm
South
trying to say.
Okay.
Okay, okay.
That's where
And
the
then-
language gets really
okay.
triple, not double.
And then for Eastmoreland, are we hesitant to downzone it?
Go ahead.
So number one includes some downzoning for Eastmoreland, right?
Yeah.
Number one here meant for the other study areas. And I was separating out Eastmoreland as with the options of, our recommendation was that if you're down designating, you'd go to 36 plus one line of homes. The
So-
plan district boundary.
Show the options again. It's the next page.
Yeah, it was simply,
The options for-
right, and I can show you the map again so you could see the area of Eastmoreland. Sure, I know, this is, yeah.
So do we need to vote, or is everyone, Who's-
it
who's in-
would be best if we got a motion and a vote
Okay.
today on this. It would
who's in
give us the
favor of
clarity.
east of,
But you need a motion.
let's narrow it
Commissioner.
down to who's in favor of east of 36? Staying current zoning.
Me.
Okay, east of 36 stays current.
So do not down.
Do not.
Do not
Right,
downzone.
east of
And again,
So
just
can we,
with.
can we
the-
get a motion and a vote? I think that
You
would
want a
help us
motion and a
all
vote?
out.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you've got your recommendations, just amend them and make a recommendation.
Okay. Okay.
So go back to your recommendations.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, I want to ask my question again. So number one, the July 2014 recommendations did not include any parts of Eastmoreland?
Did not include any parts of Eastmoreland or South Burlingame. It's the other areas, Lentz, Brentwood, Darlington, et cetera.
Okay. Is there a motion to amend the current recommendation around Eastmoreland?
There is.
Yes.
Oh, you want to state it? I move that we retain the zoning east of 36th Street east of 36th Street. Retain the zoning.
Second?
I guess we'll get there next.
No, I'm saying retain the zoning east of 36th Street. R5.
And
West,
R5.
and west of 36 would be, to clarify, to be downzone.
That's correct. That's correct.
Okay.
The motion is specifically east of 36th Street.
So is there a second?
Can I, clarification? Just to be clear, so the west side is R7, the east side is, the proposal is R5. The line that Deborah recommended included, it's both sides of 36.
Right, so
So I just want,
facing
it's
homes
a
would
very
match.
small sort of technical thing, but I wanted to be clear.
Okay.
So another clarifying question, sorry, but some of you, I think, are talking as if this motion is just dispensing with the area east of 36th, and you're going to have another discussion west, and some of you are assuming that you're motioning about the whole thing, and I want to clarify.
I think we're motioning, Howard, is your motion on the whole part of Eastmoreland?
No, it is not.
Just on east? Okay. On the west part,
We're given two options.
we're given two, so on the west part of Eastmoreland, we have to vote on this
Yeah,
first.
you need a second of that motion.
We had it, Don seconded.
Don,
Let's,
so-
Julie, let's do a vote. Julie, a vote? We're voting on the amendment to east of 36th as to it will retain its current zoning R7.
Okay, just that.
Just that. No, R5, R5,
God,
I'm
don't
sorry.
get me going.
R5. R5, and just on and we're gonna come back and vote on just the west side.
Sorry to sound so obtuse, but we're going to come back and just vote on the west side.
Yes,
And what about number 1 and number 3?
we'll come back though.
I feel accepted.
I'm going to vote yes.
Hanson. Yes. Hauk.
Yes.
Oxman.
Yes.
Rudd. Shapiro.
Yes.
Smith. Yes. St. Martin. Yes. Talmadge.
Yes.
Law.
Yes. All right,
And now,
the west side. Motion.
I move that we change the designation east of 36th, down.
West.
West of 36th, from R5 to R7.
Plus the east side of the facing lots?
Yes.
You better just say the plan district? Would that-
Plan
The
district.
plan district, which includes the lots that front on the east side of 36th.
Second.
so discussion?
Discussion.
Have anything to do with 1 and 3?
No,
No, we'll need a separate motion on 1 and 3.
we have it. We have it. Moved and seconded.
On the roster.
So just a clarifying question on this, would this include properties within the quarter-mile radius of the transit center?
Small number.
Yes.
Small number.
It's like,
It's small,
Well,
and-
so-
and they tend to be the largest lots.
They tend to be the largest lots, of course.
So that forces me to make the point that a quarter mile for walking to transit is conservative.
Right.
And people will walk further for higher quality transit. So people will walk a lot more than a quarter mile to this MAX station, I'm sure. So that's, where
So-
that radius is not a big influencer in my vote on this.
So commissioners, I believe you have a motion and a second on the
Yeah, we
table,
do.
so.
Thank you.
Julie, vote.
Yes.
Hanson. Yes. Hauk.
yes.
Oxman.
Yes.
Rudd. Sorry?
No.
Shapiro.
Yes.
Smith.
No.
St. Martin.
No.
Talmadge.
No.
Law.
No.
What do you got? Pass
Yeah,
the
it
motion?
fails. No, it's 5.
Fails. It fails.
So it retains the current zoning.
Retains the current zoning. So need a motion on the overall recommendation.
I'm going to comment here and then I'll leave.
There's no
You are leading-
public
I
comment, sir.
understand. You are leading us to litigation. What we have now is one that's standard
Per-
for
sir?
one city, another for another.
Sir,
I apologize.
there's No public comment.
There will be legal comment.
Okay. A motion on the current recommendation as amended.
So I move that we accept recommendations number 1 and 3.
Second.
And it would include the recommendation, the motion that was passed earlier, the amendment passed earlier, correct?
We didn't
Yeah.
do anything with it.
Or we didn't- oh, that's right.
Negative,
Okay.
so.
Is, Julie,
Ray.
this is on, yeah.
Hanson.
It's not a
Yes.
recommendation to change the.
Is there a discussion? Well, okay. I thought we had already discussed it.
It's typical to move in second and ask if there's discussion.
Do you want to, is there a discussion? All right. Let's, Gary?
Yeah, so what we're doing is are we leaving unresolved the question of what happens on the west side of 36?
No.
So it stays as
It
is?
stays as it is.
So if I could clarify, I think it's going to be helpful. So we're going to affirm all of the proposals other than the Eastmoreland and Burlingame.
Correct.
In Eastmoreland, we're you're leaving the current designation, the R5 designation in place for the whole area, east and west.
Yes.
And for South Burlingame, you're also keeping the R5 designation in effect.
Yes.
We're essentially just leaving things as you recommended in July, right?
Right.
Yes. No.
No,
What
that's a good
what are we changing then?
So the initial July, you departed from the July recommendation with the Eastmoreland discussion, which you already voted on. But the number one there is everything else.
Okay, so I'm confused because I asked the question specifically, did the July recommendation include any part of Eastmoreland, and you said no.
The number one does not, number one, as we worded the recommendations, what we meant with number one is for those other areas, stick with the July. Then number two was for Eastmoreland, we have two choices,
What was the July recommendation for Eastmoreland
R7.
or the
Up
plan
to
district?
36, no,
Up
just
to
up to
30s.
36, but stopping in the center line of 36. So we modified that a little bit by saying, move one
Okay,
lot
so
further
if-
west, east.
So if we applied the same analytic criteria to Eastmoreland west of 36 that we are to the rest of the July recommendation, we would go to R7 there?
Well, no, that's why we brought this to you, is because the map is much more ambiguous
I see.
in Eastmoreland, and
Okay.
those red and blue colors, the idea was that the red are blocks that are predominantly R7 and the blue are blocks that are predominantly R5. And in all those other areas, it was much more clear cut. In Eastmoreland,
Okay.
there was a mix of both of those patterns.
I'm back with the program, thank you.
Other discussion? Julie?
Yes.
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 Yes. Motion passes. Next item, economic elements.
Actually, we have one other residential density, and this one I hope will be clear cut and we'll get through it quickly. But there was a request in Concordia that we want to just quickly go through. And I'll move as fast as I can and so that we can get to a recommendation. So you heard testimony from Concordia that was a little bit analogous to the Eastmoreland testimony, except for in Concordia, you have zoning of R5 and R2.5, and you have a larger extent of these pre-platted 25 by 100 foot lots. Oops. So in this case, the neighborhood didn't take a position, but some residents requested either R5 or R7 and less R2.5. It's in response to narrow houses being built, And I'm just going to show you a couple slides of houses on 25 by 100 lots, essentially, in Concordia. And the house on the right in this example is more of a typical house in Concordia. There's a lot of small bungalows. Another example, this one has alley, so it doesn't have a front garage. Another quick example, again, the house on the left is more typical to what's in Concordia. A variety of architectural approaches here, as you can see. This is a map showing the area, and we're located between two neighborhood centers. The neighborhood center on the right is 142nd Avenue at Killingsworth, and the center on the left is the Alberta Center there. And what you have here in blue are the R5 lots that are platted at 25 by 100 foot plats. And the orange, which is a little harder to see on this map, but it's between Killingsworth and Alberta, is 25 by 100 platted also, but it's zoned R2.5. And then I've shown you the X in the middle is the grocery store at New Seasons there, and then the purple dotted line is the frequent transit line that cuts through the area. This area, just for background, was zoned R2.5 in the Albina Community Plan between Killingsworth and Alberta. And generally, R2.5 is a buffer between the neighborhood and the more intensive mixed-use zones. And that's a typical pattern found throughout the city. This map shows you where the R2.5 zoning is located throughout the city. And you can see it kind of straddles a lot of the corridors or is between corridors where they're close together. So Sunnyside, for example, between Hawthorne and Belmont is a similar situation as Concordia, which is between Alberta and Killingsworth. It's a situation where there's two corridors close together where that R2.5 essentially comes together. I outlined Concordia in the dotted line at the top of the screen, just so you know where it's located. Service analysis in this situation is important to note that there are very few service deficiencies here. This is it's not in an environmentally sensitive area or a floodplain. It has sewer and water service. It does not have significant traffic issues, at least from a capacity point of view. There's a few unimproved streets, but not to the extent you would see in outer southeast or southeast. And a very high percentage of the neighborhood has access to frequent transit. Housing supply context. This chart was in our housing background report, and it's also in a number of other staff reports, but it's our way of explaining and connecting the dots between the different household types in the city and the different housing types we have. And the thing to remember about this is that different housing types serve different household types depending on their size and affordability. And this diagram shows what's affordable to different groups. And so to give you an example, the only housing type G, that's affordable to anyone in the city is the SRO, small studio apartment style. In contrast, like the high-rise towers or the large lot detached homes are only affordable to the highest income groups without any kind of cost burden. And so we use this kind of matrix to assess whether our comp plan is providing enough housing of the right type for the different income groups and family size groups. One of the things to note when we look at this is that we've talked a lot about affordable housing, and we are not, our current comp plan is not yet providing an easy path for those lower income groups or for entry-level home ownership. And in fact, with our Downs designations in East Portland and some of the ones you just talked about, even though they may be in the right places for down designations, they're not necessarily high amenity areas, but they are reducing the supply of affordable single family and more affordable apartment buildings where we've reduced the R2 zoning in East Portland. And that may be okay because we don't want that development in East Portland, but citywide, we've reduced that supply. So it's really important to pay attention to this R2 and R2.5 zoning, because that's the zoning that provides the housing types that are most accessible to those household groups and income groups. So with that in mind, what we're talking about is
Excuse me, are there numbers attached to these groups?
Yes.
Is Group 8 a millionaire and Group 1, I don't quite get the.
Yeah, we have that in the housing background report. Group 1 is essentially very low income. Group 8 is I forget the exact cutoff, but it's over 100,000 a year for household income. So there's
You can pretty much figure it out.
You can kind of figure it out. Group 5 or 6, I think, is median income.
Yeah.
And so for, the R2.5 and R2 groups, really you're talking about plexes or small lot detached or attached. And those are the lowest, the least costly home ownership opportunities we have in the city. Because if you move to the larger lots, you get more expensive, larger lots that you're buying. And if you go to higher density, you're into a different construction type. So just to use household group 6, for example, they make $60,000 to $75,000 of annual income, and a typical group 6 might be 2 adults with school-age children, one working full-time and one part-time. These small lot single-family houses or attached houses are really the only option if they want to own a home, if they want to have some ground for a yard, and if they want to avoid being cost burdened. And so that's why we're looking carefully at the supply of R2 and R2.5 zoning. So I think our argument here is that it's very important for this scale of zoning to exist for affordability, but there are a variety of forms it could take. And so the form that we saw pictures of was this detached skinny houses, but you can have at the same density a whole variety of other housing types. And we heard testimony from Concordia that they weren't necessarily against density. What they were concerned about was the form of the skinny houses. And so, for example, these are at the same density, they just happen to be pairs attached to each other rather than detached. Or you can also do cottage type housing, which we've seen in Concordia as well, or accessory dwelling units as another option. So our recommendation in Concordia is to not downzone the R2.5 or R5 areas, but like Eastmoreland, we believe there is a code solution that could look at what are the appropriate forms in the R2.5 zone through this single-family project, and that's the staff recommendation for this particular request.
Discussion? Chris?
So this is not an issue with underlying old plats. This is the actual zoning that people are having trouble with the design types that can be built on that zoning?
Well, in the R2.5, it's a case of both. There's underlying plats and it's zoned for 2,500 square foot lots. So it's both.
Other discussion? Are we okay with the recommendation? Think we're good?
So I did have a question, sorry, about
Go
the,
ahead.
just as a point of reference, why didn't you discuss infrastructure in relation to Eastmoreland? Or did we discuss that at our July 2014 in terms of
We
access
did.
to
We did provide the same infrastructure data on that in our staff report.
Oh, okay.
And Concordia has fewer constraints than Eastmoreland.
Okay.
But not a huge difference.
Just curious.
Okay, we're okay with it. Thanks. Economic elements?
Oh, did you print those out too?
I brought this.
So did I.
I want to make sure we all get on the
Can we
same
take a quick
page as
break?
we start out with the paper.
This was,
Okay.
no.
Oh, we're going to take 2 minutes to get.
We're going to take a couple minutes for a break.
You might have announced it. God. What a dumbass chair. Why didn't you announce it, Bob? Somebody just got up and spoke.
All right, now. I'm just gonna get totally buried in